Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Picking up one of the most competitive talks among the three right now, because community matters, right? So today, this is the fourth OpenSearch Con, but the first OpenSearch conference as a foundation. So we all see the uplift in the food. So we're gonna talk about this journey, like how it went through. So this talk is more about the blueprint, what it took for us to get into the OpenSearch Foundation, the nuts and bolts of things, and particularly from the community and the infra side of things. My name is Saurabh. I'm part of the OpenSearch org, leading the infra and the search teams. I have Peter with me, who is a senior engineer, again, on the OpenSearch infra side of things. And we both kind of look into the community aspect and the release build infra along with other folks, some of which are here in the audience. So let's take a quick look at our agenda. So we'll start with like a very basic introduction, like why do we even need this talk, right? Moving to foundation is not just a cosmetic change. There's a lot more than that. We'll take a quick run into our background, like the timeline, why it mattered last year, why did we move to a foundation. We'll look into some of our metrics and insight, like how we were doing as a project before foundation and how did we evolve ourselves after it. We'll also touch upon some of the community tooling and things that we inspired from, like other projects, just because we are part of the Linux Foundation. Then Peter will take over to talk about some of the nitty-gritty of this migration, the nuts and bolts of it, especially covering the different processes we have had, the different resources, migration, name it, like DNS, website, and things like that, and of course, the whole mammoth of infrastructure that we have. Towards the end, what we'll talk about is some of our stories that we learned, of course, good and bad, and then we'll cover the aspect of where we are headed from here, since we are just 1 year into the foundation. If you have any questions, please note it down for the end, and if you have any feedback for the community, we are open to kind of discuss those as well. Now, what does it take to move like a large, active open source project into a foundation? Well, it's definitely more than renaming the project. In fact, it could often feel like moving the entire city, but what we are doing is moving the governance of the city, the infrastructure of the city, and all the community together to an all-new home. OpenSearch did this journey in 2024 and 2025, from being an AWS-led project to becoming a vendor-neutral organization under the software foundation with Linux help. As part of this project, we'll go more into details about the different things what we have done, specifically around the governance, which is the most important aspect of the community. We have like technical steering committees, special interest groups. These are some names. We'll get into more details on how they do their function, how did they evolve, and what we at AWS also learned about this open governance. So let's look at the very basic question, like why did we even need to join a foundation? Well, OpenSearch didn't start as a foundation since beginning, right? Early 2021, it was a very clear AWS initiative to make sure that a very simple goal was to make sure the stack is truly open source, especially after some of the licensing changes of our predecessors. Now, at that point in time, AWS and some of the initial partners nurtured it for the initial growth and momentum the project needed. By the end of like 2023 or 2024, OpenSearch was pretty much a thriving community. We had like 350+ million downloads. We have a good user base of 1,000+ contributors. But then the question remains the same, that what was the need? Like, why did we even need to go to a foundation at that point in time? In short, it was a neutral governance and long-term sustainability. And AWS realizing that open source as a project needed to belong to everyone. So let's look at some of the aspects of, under the foundation, what OpenSearch could enjoy. The very first thing is vendor-neutral oversight, so that it maintains the long-term sustainability and has a neutral governance. As part of this, we created a technical steering committee, which kind of is inclusive of people not just from AWS, but also from other organizations, to make sure that the technical roadmap and development of the project continues to grow in the interest of the broader community. We have an elected governing body, which kind of manages key decisions on things like what are the resources to use, what are the key dependencies of the project from security aspects, what are the key events, even from marketing, like organizing an event like this, all comes from a decision of the governing body. The bottom line was these bodies ensure transparency, accountability, and also a proper open communication. The next thing was needed was a shared ownership so that it's more sustainable ecosystem. Now, what does shared ownership means? OpenSearch has different processes in line, like it could be related to release management, code-based management, how your communication works on Slack, how forum engagement works. So there was a need to kind of open source and democratize all of these processes. So special interest group was created with an intent to make all of these decisions more decentralized, and that is what we call it SIG. And we'll go into more details on different aspects of the SIG, but think of it like it's a common aspect where you herd the community cat together or like-minded people together to take important decisions for the project growth, which can be delegated from TSC to this group. The next important thing was also neutral infrastructure and vendor diversity. So as the project grew and more contributions come in, we don't want OpenSearch to evolve into a project which is very close to just AWS technologies. Take an example of if you're developing a snapshot as a feature, you would not want to just look out for developing S3 as a backend store for it, right? So you want to kind of build an ecosystem where you would give equal accountability, or I would say equal importance to any other cloud-native infrastructure that is out there, be it GCP or Azure. So supporting this vendor diversity was an important aspect of joining the foundation, and that can only happen if there are more contributors who come from this outlook. One other aspect of this infra is, if we look at our open source infra by itself, like how build releases and community engagement are run, they also should not be tied up with AWS specific internals, for example, like AWS pipelines, right? It should be more open source, more vanilla, and that is how the community can understand and they can participate in it. And the last but not the least, the most important aspect of is how you do accelerate innovation. That can only happen if you have more hands on deck. The broader perspective, any open source project needs the continuity and innovation. And with the help of opening the doors and inviting more collaboration by getting into the Linux Foundation, OpenSearch is kind of set for that work. Now, if you look at it in a different perspective, this is the movie that OpenSearch world had seen before. For example, if you take Kubernetes as an example, in 2016, when Google donated it to CNCF, it had like about 2,700 contributors before. But in the next immediate few years, it grew up to like 76 to 80K contributors, which is like about 25 to 30x growth. And the only reason is reducing the barriers for others to invest by neutral governance and also vendor neutrality. So this is pretty much about what is the need to join the foundation. The other thing what we need to kind of look at is a little bit on the timeline and the motivation on how did we arrive at it. So let's set the stage for it. We don't have to go a lot into like open distro. We can just skip it because it was like an open source distribution, which AWS came up with at that point in time, which was Apache 2 license for users to start using Elasticsearch out of the box. However, the main thing happened around early 2021 when Elastic license changed, and this kind of prompted AWS to fork Elasticsearch into OpenSearch and then Kibana into Dashboard and license it under Apache 2.0. Well, in the first few years, as we talked briefly, AWS did the heavy lifting of all the engineering work, release, processes, support that is needed for this project while also inviting external contributions. By the end of like 2023 and 2024, AWS was, or I would say OpenSearch was doing pretty much good in terms of the number of partners. It has like 70 plus different partners. It has about 350 million downloads. It was already a kind of thriving community. And the reason is because during the whole process of this 3 year, AWS realized that to be open source, it is not only the license change, but it is also driving the community and letting the project belong to the community. Even though we instilled the process of public Slack communication, we instilled the process of opening up our roadmaps, the real thing came into 2024, which was a big move. On September 16, 2024, at the Open Source Summit at Vienna, that's where it was announced that AWS was transferring this project to the OpenSearch Software Foundation hosted by the Linux Foundation. Now, this kind of positioned OpenSearch as a peer among many other projects under Linux Foundation with its own independent identity. The important thing what came along, which I briefly touched upon, was the creation of TSC, which is the Technical Steering Committee, to make sure that the project's outlook and the roadmap is governed by not just AWS folks, but also is inclusive of other partners like Uber, SAP, who were the premier partners at that point in time, and also about 13 plus general partners who joined, like Atlassian, Canonical, Avian, or InstaCluster, and many more. So the message was loud and clear. The OpenSearch was belonging to everybody, and it was part of the broader community. Right after that, like in a month's time frame when all the legal paperwork was done, that's when the OpenSearch infra team, the AWS infra and OSPO team, and the release engineering team on the Linux Foundation started working together, because then the real game started on how do we move ahead of this paperwork and actually transfer the ownership of the project and all the infra to the Linux Foundation. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of those details, I would like to kind of walk us through a quick insight on metrics on how the project did before and after that particular migration. So let's look at the timeline before joining Foundation, which is like around the inception of OpenSearch until 2024 September. So we had like about 120 plus repositories. We did like about 45 releases, 2 major, 1.x and 2.x. We had like 1,000 plus active contributors, 700 million downloads on GitHub and other sources that we have, like Docker. We had about 3,000 members already on the public Slack. But fast forward to the year, or I would say even less than a year, since last September, we grew our partners from 75 to 97. We now have a lot more non-AWS maintainers, which grew up to 71 across the project. The active contributors grew humongously, like from 1,000 in 3 years to 3,500 in just 1 year. That's where we also kind of grew on our membership participation on Slack and forum, and then we added new orgs along the way from the maintainership point of view. These are not just partners, but think of it about how our maintainers are distributed across different orgs. So one important thing along this journey, what we were already tracking is the health of the project and what are the key metrics are the drivers before and after, and even this different phases we went into the timeline. So for example, we had to have a lot of strong focus on the project health, the collaboration diversity. We wanted to kind of make sure there are no bottlenecks in the project, like for example, in terms of the issues, untriaging, the stale PRs, driving engagement, so that anybody who is new participating in the project, they get unblocked, and it kind of encourages the community to come and contribute. So we had a very in-house system which AWS built for these project tracking, which was pretty good in the sense because it had like general insights on the contribution activity, the issue count, issue open, stale PRs. There were a lot of aggregations also on a per project basis, which could give a high-level summary on how the project was doing overall. It kind of helped in the initial 3 years for us and also for the community to kind of look into some of these details. But the challenge was discoverability, and operating this metric dashboard and maintaining it was a challenge. And sometimes you would also run into the aspects of not just discoverability, but also signing and permissions model required for these things. So that's when immediately after when we moved to the Linux Foundation, the very first thing what we kind of adopted was the LFX Insight, because health metrics are the important key metrics that people in the community look out for. It kind of drives how the project is doing, and it also encourages the community. With LFX Insight, as a first step, we kind of got this open source platform, which is designed to provide the transparency, again, contributions around, and then also the health of the project. This was a joint exercise by Infra team and the Linux Foundation to kind of source this data from different sources like GitHub, Slack, Discourse, and other social media. So it's kind of a very nice overview, which is just not like from the code perspective, but also from other engagements, which are super important, like your documentation, like your forums, how many times people are talking on socials. So all of these metrics are today provided by LFX Insight, which kind of gives you the whole view of how project is thriving. And then the another thing what we got from LFX Insight was the fact that this is an ever-evolving project, and then it is not just one, AWS or any one partner who need to invest and maintain this, because this is an open source project, again, which will continue to grow. And like, for example, they came up with a very new UI, if you want to check it out. And this is something we kind of, or OpenSearch gets for free just because being part of the Linux Foundation. All right, so now that we have gone through the background, we understood why and what part of it, so I would let Peter drive through the how part of it, which goes into the nitty-gritty of and nuts and bolts of this migration.
Right. Okay, thanks, Saurabh. So as Saurabh just mentioned regarding why we joined the foundation, regarding these backgrounds and motivations, we need to talk about the meat of it, which is migrations. And migration itself contains a lot of very complicated activities and steps. And because of that, we need a lot of collaborations and work together with different parties. You can think of us, Amazon, as well as Linux Foundation and the community, all work together on this. And because of the complications of these things, we roughly separate out and categorize these activities into 3 phases. Now, the first one we're talking about is governance and structure, which you can think of this as process and workflow updates to the community, how we help the community to resolve an issue in the public, and finishing a request. Now, second is resources. These are just assets that were being utilized every day, daily basis for the projects. Third is the infrastructure. These are the environmental stacks that we use to hosting our build, test, or the release systems, if you may. Now, as we previously mentioned that OpenSearch joining the foundation is not just a renaming, but more like changing a direction going forward. And because of that, we're calling this migration a step from the internal practices to open leaderships. So let's talk more details about it. First is the governance and structure. Now, let's see what previously we've done. Previously is mainly Amazon managed process. Like Saurabh has said, there's an office called Open Source Program Office, or the OSPO team. What they do is any of the resources related to open source is being managed by them. So if you think of any GitHub organizations or Docker hubs or PyPI repositories, those are being managed by them as the owner. We need to request the resources from them. Second would be something like ad hoc individual requests. So for example, if somebody needs to change a secret in the repository settings, or they want to add a new maintainer. Now, these previously are not going through any of the normal process. It's just people pinning the admins in the internal Slack channel in AWS. And third is more like internal ticketing system. Amazon has some internal ticketing system that is not being accessible from the outside. So let's say if a community member wants to do something, request something, there's not really an official way of doing that. So we want to change this, right, with the goal of these, which is being more transparent, scalable, and community first. One of the things we're changing is regarding the internal process. Taking a look at this screenshot from our internal Slack. Now, Craig is our Amazon employee, and he is trying to request a secret being updated to a security repository that he's part of the maintainer. Similarly, Chase also wants to update one of the maintainer list for his team by adding a new maintainer into it. These people are internal folks, but even for them, it's very difficult because they also don't know what is the process. They're just going to the admin channel and ask, hey, can you help us on that? What is the process? There's no really defined process, just directly active by the admins. So we want to change this. We propose a new SOP, a new issue template through the GitHub request. We got it reviewed by the TSC. We want to actually create a new issue template for people to access. So if you have a new request, anything regarding the GitHub settings or anything, you can just send an issue in the open, and then we can work with you. This works pretty well, and as you can see in the example, Sally is requesting a secret change, just like what Craig was requesting. She stated all of this information in the ticket, and then one of the existing admins will respond to the ticket, and everybody can see what is happening right now. They know, okay, there's a secret actually updated in these corresponding repositories. Similarly, you see that Andrew is trying to add a new maintainer from ByteDance. So what he needs to do is just opening a PR, which stated the like maintainers, nominees, all of the contributions, as well as open a GitHub request, append it in there, and ask people internally to finish the vote through the maintainers. Once that vote is done and we verify it, this is done. We'll just add the person to the maintainers list. Quick and simple. Now, this has been working for a while until we meet a problem. If you see this list, this is most of the requests we're doing through that GitHub request. If you have a user permission issues or settings issues or secret update, we can just go through this step. But the problem arrives if you have a new repository. If someone wants to add a new plugin, or if you want to introduce a new feature, there's not an easy way to do this because of the reason that the process is already complicated internally. Before we even move to the foundation, this is how we actually create a new repository. We first contact the OSPO team. We need to open a release ticket with them. We stated, hey, this is our RCs, this is our code, this is our license. Can you please help review this for us? They'll do a lot of reviews on this, and once that is finished, they are closing the ticket and create a private repository for us. Next step is that the person who requests this request will take the repo, go to the admin, or OpenSearch project admin, internal wiki, and check their wiki to see what's the next step. It will tell you to do a lot of things, a full list of things, until you reach a second ticket. You have to open this internal ticket with the admin team saying, hey, I've done all of this. Could you make this private repo public? Admin team review this and confirm all of this is done, and then they make it public onto the GitHub. You might think that is all, right? Now you get an open repo. You can just work on it. Nope, because now we have to apply a lot more steps, such as we need to add it to the OpenSearch metrics that we just talked about. If we don't add it, we can't really gather all these metrics index, and we need to do CVE scans on it. We also need to add GitHub bot onto it, like dependent bot or our own admin bot, or like a build bot on top of it, so we can automate a lot of these steps. It's very complicated, it's very tedious, it's not open. So we really want to change that. And the first thing we need to do is to replace the OSPO team. OSPO team is very useful for us, but it's very internal, and it has a lot of duties. It needs to review the RFCs, do IP reviews, code reviews, license review. Even after all of this review, you need to make a decision. Is this repo really needed to be added? Or can this be combined with an existing plugin, or can be part of the OpenSearch core, right? Who is making that decision? Once we move to the foundation, we really need an entity to do that. That's why we bring up the special interest group that we just talked about. The special interest group is a group that can oversee and coordinate with specific interest, and is being reported to the TSC. It leads by recognized expert in the relevant fields in order to make that decision for us. Let's take a look. The first SIG, or special interest group we create, is the big build interest group, specifically to build on the health, oversees the health of OpenSearch repositories. And it's doing a lot of these things, as you can see. It's guiding the repository management, aligning the standards, informed recommendations to the TSC on whether we should add this repo or not. And last but not least, it has a list of people with expertise from diverse background. And if you look at the initial member list, 3 of us, Michael Fro, Saurabh, as well as Jiaxiang from ByteDance, they're all expert of OpenSearch and Lucene. And then you have Viraj from the OpenSearch dashboard side, as well as me, who is working mainly on the infra and release side. If we find we need more expert on a specific topic, for example, machine learning or anything, we'll just involve the maintainers from those plugins to talk about it and make a decision. So let's see. After we replace OSPO with this big, what happens? Somebody is requesting a new repository called Dashboard Investigation. They raise the request, And I'm tagging in all of the big members to do a review and vote on it. And after some discussions and vote, this has been sealed that we are ready to create this repository. We raise a ticket to the Linux Foundation, who is the now new owner of the GitHub organizations. And with their ownership, they can just create a public repository directly for us. Job's done. So next will be the resources, right? We finished the governance and structure update. We need to update the resources as well. Resources, as we stated, a lot of these related to like domains, GitHubs, website, or third-party repositories. And these are the first few things we work with the Linux Foundation to do the migration. First is the domain registrar. Initially, we're hosting our domains in the AWS Route 53, and we're able to transfer it to a Linux Foundation. We started by transferring the OpenSearch.net domains, and it works. Testing for a week works pretty well. So we started to migrate all of the other domains, including OpenSearch.org, and completed by November 18, 2024. After that, we're doing a lot more things, for example, DNS records, and we're transferring all of hundreds and thousands of DNS records to them, and we're also updating our old emails. Previously, these emails are being hosted internally with AWS Workmail, and now we're transferring as redirect list through groups.io. And we're creating even new emails. For example, previously, if somebody has to report a security issue, they have to go through a Amazon.com email, but now it's being redirected as a security@opensearch.org email for that purpose. Now, these resources might seem very simple and straightforward, but they take a lot of time and effort to manage it because we have a lot of resources hosting on this DNS record as well as these email conversations. So really thanks to Linux Foundation work with us, especially during the 3.0.0 release, major release. They ensure us there's no issues with the artifacts building and process. So next will be GitHub ownership, right? We're able to transfer the ownership from the OSPO team to the Linux Foundation pretty straightforward after some discussion internally from 11/8, which is November 8, 2024, over probably like 2 weeks, quick forward. The hard part comes in when we want to migrate the website. There are two websites. I'm talking about the first one, which is our project website, the main website, namely the opensearch.org. Previously, all of our website is using Jekyll to make the builds, and then deploy to S3 bucket for people to access. But now, since we moved to Linux Foundation, we have to use WordPress. Linux Foundation generously help us making this migration, rewrite the website from Jekyll to WordPress within 4 to 5 months. And we're able to launch it just early this year. But that is only for the main website. The problem lies on the documentation website, because previously documentation website is just a subdomain of, or actually not a subdomain, but a folder, subfolder of the main website, /docs. Now it becomes its own website, become docs.opensearch.org. Initially, we're able to search all of the information in one place because two websites hosted in the same location. But now we separate it out, and Docs website is not able to find any blogs anymore. Any of the new blogs or the links is being wrong. It has been that way for a little bit, so we have to work with Linux Foundation to fix that immediately, or it's actually impacting the user experience. If you take a look at this JSON file, what happened is previously in Jekyll, every single website is able to generate an index in JSON with every single URLs and path to that website with the contents, title, and types. And once the project website, the main website, moved to WordPress, this is non-existent anymore. We couldn't find that data. Linux Foundation is able to generously provide us actually a new endpoint from the WordPress. So every day in the morning, we're actually pulling new data from WordPress instance. As you can see here, every single blog now is being indexed with their title, content, and tags. And it's even better than before because previously we only have documentation, blogs, and the events. But now we also have announcements and news from other places, like in Linux Foundation's own website. So as you can see in this graph, we're able to have more filters, announcement, blogs, and news coming from multiple different places. This is actually better. Now, for the WordPress site to search whatever documentations, which is the reverse, right? that one we're still going on. We're currently still working with the Linux Foundation to get that working, so we can search all the content from both sides. Now, we are talking about all the resources we have already migrated. There's something that we haven't migrated, which is the signing system. Signing system is being used on a lot of different places, specifically the artifacts. We're releasing a lot of artifacts across different distributions, and there's not only a single way of signing. Some of them is PGP signing, some of them is like macOS notarizations, and some of them is like other stuff like .NET, right? Because of that, we're using some internal AWS pipelines to do so. And we're still taking the recommendations from Linux Foundation regarding how to migrate it, maybe move to SIG store, which is open source, or anything else. This is still going on. Okay, so last, we're finally here in today's status. We're trying to migrate the infrastructure. And we're still going on with that. Infrastructure is more related to all of the resources, actually the assets that we are hosting the build system. The build system is the system that we're actually building all of these artifacts and hosting them for people to access, which involve a lot of previously AWS-specific services, such as S3 bucket, EC2 instance, and more. The thing that we have already done is this part, which is the secrets. Previously, we have hundreds of secrets hosted on AWS Secret Manager and being accessed through Jenkins or for GitHub Actions. We're able to migrate 90% or 95% of them to one password, which is an open and free alternative to that. As regarding to the other resources, we're still in discussion with the Linux Foundation on a daily basis on the migration plan. So yeah, that's pretty much what we have right now regarding migrations. So I'll pass back to Saurabh regarding what we learned here.
Thanks, Peter. So that has been a humongous amount of work and effort that went in across different orgs that we have had, starting from AWS and internally OSPO, the AWS infra, and then OpenSearch infra team, which worked in collaboration with the release engineering team of the Linux Foundation. So no migration is perfect, right? So we will be kidding ourselves if we say that it was all smooth and nice. I mean, in the things that did not work, Peter did cover about how did we break the search when we moved the website, documentation, and blog. And then we realized at a later stage that, okay, we had to go and fix because of the change of infra that we had from our S3 and OpenSearch clusters to a WordPress kind of infrastructure. We would also, doing a lot of these movements like DNS and email and all of that in a very compressed timeline was kind of little stressful because it involved multiple entities without any downtime. One thing which we also kind of wanted at that point in time was, can we actually rename the GitHub project itself, which was something that we backtracked very quickly because it would break a lot of things from the build scripts to our documentation. So we, kind of at some point preferred completeness over perfection and simply stability over perfection, I would say. So what is the key lesson that we learned? So this migration always requires over-communication. And even when we were kind of in the early state of creating those build interest group or those SIGs, a lot of time people were not understanding those things from the very beginning. But over the period of time, people saw the need of it and also how they were communicating well with the other community, so which kind of just helped. So the lesson learned is over-communicating, because even if we break things, community will be forgiving as long as we are transparent and we are being more open about what is the issue and how we are handling it. Last thing I would want to kind of talk about is the journey, which is just 1 year in the books. It isn't over. There's a lot more that is coming in. So what we want to kind of more focus on decentralizing this community leadership. TSC is there to help us on the broader roadmap, but we would kind of want to focus on creating more build interest groups. So if you are somebody who is interested in search, vector search, security, we need these kind of core groups to kind of drive the project innovation going forward. What we also need is to focus on diversity, which means that we kind of invite people from different backgrounds, different groups, different organizations, all coming together, so that not one single organization is dominating the whole project, maybe not more than 30% in the next 2 years. The next thing what we would also kind of want to close out on is the technical vision. So OpenSearch, with all of these foundation movement, has also emphasized on opening its roadmap, making sure that community is aware what is coming new. And if you look at the roadmap right now, OpenSearch is doubling down on the cloud native, agentic AI, and all of these real-time analytics systems. So if you have been in this conference for the last 2 days, you would have seen talks around how we are handling trillion scale of vectors, the integration with other technologies like data fusion and others. So, and also on the observability space, we had a keynote. So OpenSearch is kind of set to work with all of different community and create a seamless stack for solving these technologies. Last but not least, it's also kind of moving towards more pluggable architecture. So if you are somebody who is interested in building a niche plugin, or they are wanting to focus on building a specific application, OpenSearch is evolving itself to become decentralized in terms of deployment, also kind of giving more flexibility for these plugin developers to kind of come in and build their features on. So yeah, that has been the journey so far. I would be opening the floor for any questions if you have. All right, thank you, everyone. It's been a great audience.